Here was a man blessed with the strength of a god, but cursed with the weaknesses of a mortal. This is the epic and, yeah, tragic story of Samson, a hero whose divine power was matched only by his capacity for self-destruction. It's one of those timeless tales, right? About how our greatest gifts can't always save us from, well, ourselves.
But look, this is way more than just some ancient legend. At its heart, this is a raw human drama. We're about to explore a passionate love that leads to complete ruin, a betrayal that cuts deeper than any blade, and a final, absolutely earth-shattering act of vengeance that seals a tragic fate.
All right, so where does a story like this even begin? Well, it starts before Samson was even born, with a divine promise made to a couple who had totally lost all hope of having a child. This sets the stage for a life that was never, ever meant to be ordinary. To really get why a hero was so needed, you have to look at the world he was born into. For 4 long decades, that's a long time, the Israelites were oppressed by their enemies, the Philistines. They were a people desperate for a deliverer, someone strong enough to finally break the chains of their servitude. Now, what's really fascinating here is that Samson's power wasn't just brute force. It was tied to this sacred status. He was going to be a Nazirite. And get this, it wasn't a choice he made. It was a holy vow, a consecration to God that defined his entire existence, right from the moment of his conception. This vow came with some very specific rules, delivered by an angel, no less. No wine or any other fermented drink, nothing unclean to eat, and the most crucial rule of all, his hair was never, ever to be cut. This last one, as we're going to see, was the literal physical link to his incredible strength. It was his power source right there for the world to see. So as Samson grows into a man, his divine power starts to emerge in some pretty incredible ways. But right alongside it, we see the first signs of a fatal flaw. His passions, especially for women outside his own people, start to steer his destiny. His first legendary feat happens when he's confronted by a roaring lion. With no weapon in hand, the story says the Spirit of the Lord rushed upon him and he just tore the lion apart as if it were a young goat. I mean, can you imagine? This was the first true glimpse of the awesome power he was working with. So, feeling pretty bold after that whole lion incident, Samson poses a riddle at his own wedding feast. It's a clever one, based on a secret only he knows. He challenges 30 Philistine guests. So, how about you? Think you could figure it out? Okay, here it is. Out of the eater came something to eat. Out of the strong came something sweet. The answer? Honey from the carcass of the lion he had killed. See, the eater was the lion, and the sweet was the honey he later found inside. Pretty clever, huh? But his opponents were completely stumped. And right here, the theme of betrayal enters his story for the first time. Since they couldn't solve the riddle, the Philistines threaten Samson's new wife. She weeps and pressures him until he finally gives her the answer. And what does she do? She immediately gives it to his enemies. This first betrayal just ignites Samson's rage and kicks off his long, violent conflict with the Philistines. Which brings us to the most infamous chapter of his life, and the name that's forever linked with his, Delilah. This is where Samson's 2 defining traits, his love for Philistine women and his divine purpose, are set on a catastrophic collision course. The Philistine rulers, desperate to neutralize Samson, go to Delilah with an offer that's basically impossible to refuse. Each of the lords promised her 1,100 pieces of silver to find out his secret. We're talking about a massive fortune, a life-changing sum of money that pretty much sealed her motivation. Her strategy was just relentless emotional warfare. Day after day she pleaded. She accused him of not truly loving her. She just wore him down. 3 times, Samson lied to her about the source of his strength. But he couldn't resist her forever. Eventually, just exhausted by her constant pressure, he broke. And with the telling of his secret, the hero's downfall is immediate and absolute. The man who could defeat armies is brought down not by a sword, but by a whisper in the wrong ear. This betrayal leads to his capture, and his humiliation would be total. These are the fateful words he finally confessed to Delilah. He revealed everything about his Nazirite vow, explaining that his uncut hair was the sacred link to his power. By telling her this, he basically placed his entire destiny right into her hands. As he slept on her lap, a Philistine crept in and shaved his head. And in that moment, the story tells us,
the Lord left him. When he woke up, he thought he could fight like he always did, but that supernatural strength had just vanished. He was, finally, like any other man. The Philistines' revenge was swift and absolutely brutal. They seized him, gouged out his eyes, and bound him with bronze shackles. The once mighty deliverer of Israel was reduced to a blind slave, forced to do the humiliating work of grinding grain in the prison.
But the story isn't over. In his darkest hour, blinded and broken in a Philistine prison, his hair began to grow back. And this sets the stage for one final, spectacular act of divine power and vengeance that would cement his legacy forever.
The Philistine lords held this massive festival for their god, Dagon, celebrating Samson's capture. To complete their victory, they brought the blind champion out into the temple to be the centerpiece of their mockery, a trophy for thousands to jeer at.
And this moment right here brilliantly shows his final turn back to God. Amidst all the scorn, Samson utters a desperate prayer. It's not just a general plea for strength, but a very specific request for vengeance, a final reckoning for everything he'd lost. He asks for his power back one last time, and his prayer was answered. Placing his hands on the two central pillars supporting the temple, Samson pushed with all his restored might. The entire structure came crashing down, killing thousands of Philistines, including all of their rulers. He finally fulfilled his destiny, killing more of Israel's enemies in his death than he ever had in his entire life. So what can we take away from such a tragic life? Well, Samson's story is a powerful reminder that a divine calling doesn't just override your personal choices. It shows that immense gifts are meant for a purpose beyond ourselves, and it's a stark warning that passion, when it's misplaced, can lead to utter ruin. And yet, it also reveals that even in our greatest failures, there can be a path to redemption. And so, this ancient story leaves us with a question that's just as relevant today. Samson's physical strength came from a sacred vow, but he lost it when his human desires led him astray. It really forces us all to ask, where does our own greatest strength truly lie? Is it in our own abilities or in our connection to something greater than ourselves? Now that's a question worth pondering.